And this is where I realized that Alay Vijnan had a kind of an ocean of consciousness, this person here. So, and he discards, he's free of the baggage. We have lived somehow in a very, very fragmented world currently, especially post-industrial revolution. Imagination goes beyond reason because reason has certain limitations. Do I observe? Do I actually witness? Am I aware of the evolving nature of universe? Because every small action, has ripples everywhere.
As a part of ongoing dialogue about the legacy of India's imagination, I bring to you a dialogue with Narendra Dengle, who's an architect, a teacher, and a thinker from Pune. Narendra and I go back many years. We have known each other since our childhood. Our parents were freedom fighters. They were also a part of India's movement for social justice. They were a part of the socialist movement. When I think back, I remember some of the leaders of India's freedom struggle, people such as Gandhi, Ambedkar, Jayaprakash Narayan, Narendra Dev, Achyutrao Patwardhan, Vinoba Bhave, and Sane Guruji. They all followed a path that took them to spirituality. I'm not surprised, therefore, where the sensitivity that we inherited from these people is taking us to seek a greater consciousness, connection, compassion, and spirituality. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Before we start our dialogue, I'm going to show you some of the marvelous architectural designs that Narendra has created. And then we will start the dialogue.
Hi, Uday. Lovely meeting you across the seas and nations. It's lovely to connect, really, because I think what you have opened up is a huge Pandora's box. You got such loaded things, imagination, science, and curiosity, but you're right there, because you put your finger on it actually. So I look forward to this interesting session.
Point of doing all this is that there isn't one truth and not one dominant perspective that should prevail our imagination of India. But there should be a space in which multiple perspectives can enrich each individual's, each citizen's opportunity to create their own journey also.
True, absolutely true.
I want to quickly set up a little framework for
Yeah.
my curiosity and how I want to present this dialogue to the younger generation of India that is hungry for multiple perspectives, for creating their own options, seeing their own options. And since you are an architect, you and I shared a journey in design. 50 years ago, I was sitting in your house that's when I was exploring my options between the field of architecture and design. I had just heard of NID, had got the application form for NID. I don't remember what you said, but I do remember that my conversation with you uh, prompted me to pursue a career path that was less defined as a career, but more open to possibilities into the future. And I attribute that to my dialogue with you. So thank you for that.
Oh, thanks, Uday. Thanks for remembering all this. Yes, I have vivid memories of that. It was your mother also, your
Yes.
mother, yourself, and I probably. You're
Yes.
talking.
Excellent. So coming the things at a very high level, I wanted to bring into our conversation our journeys, the journey of everything that we have connected with, people, events, places, objects, architecture, whatever that might be. And everything has moved through time and has evolved through time. And I'm curious to see those journeys. Relationships, the relationships we have formed over time. Again, with all of these things, people, objects, environment, universe, our whole inner self, and so on.
Mm.
Also, how our consciousness has changed, evolved, expanded.
Mm.
And finally, what does it mean to our creativity and how it has influenced the way we engage with the world? So this is like some of the things I would love to touch upon. So I do want to bring up something that you said, and that's really tweaked my mind. So Alaya Vidnyan, you brought it up. It comes from Buddhist tradition. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the reason why I was curious about it is it ties everything to your spiritual journey. And so while speaking of that, I would like to know where it came from. What is the context of you becoming aware of it, interested in it, and how it ties to everything that we do?
That's a very good beginning, Uday. Way back in 1970, when I passed out from college, and I moved to Gujarat a bit and then went to Delhi. And I was reading quite a lot actually in those days, quite a lot. And reading, uh, I was already familiar with Krishnamurti, J. Krishnamurti, and his thinking. Uh, it was it was Rausai Patwardhan who had initiated me into looking at Krishnamurti, and but I had never attended his talk. So in 1972, when I attended it in Delhi at Marwankar um,
Auditorium.
Sabha, it was actually a pandal. And I arrived there late and standing right at the back. And Krishnaji was saying something. And he said, thought is the response of memory. And many things kind of, it was like a lot of breeze coming through the windows. Windows suddenly opening up. I could hear the sound of shutters opening and things like that. I don't know how to call this experience, but it led me into reading and understanding many things, which we, for a better word, call spirituality. It is to understand what is the purpose of life, from where do we all arrive, all things like that. They kind of clouded. From there, I started reading Mahayana also. And it was also Gaitonde, if you remember, the very wonderful painter who uh, who gave me a book on Lankavatar Sutra. It's a book that is called Lankavatar Sutra, one of the precious sort of uh, granthas of Mahayana. So reading that, D.T. Suzuki's introduction, I came across this word, Alaya Vijnana. And it was intriguing. I didn't understand because one has not studied Sanskrit. So what does it mean actually? And one realized that this is some kind of what we call today cloud, where all information gets piled up. And whoever can resonate with that, can access this. You know, whoever comes to a level or resonating in some way or the other, I won't call them levels also, then you do access this. And this is where I realized that Alay Vijnan had a kind of an ocean of consciousness, which is out there and of which you are part also. So it is within, it is without. So that is what the connection with Alay Vijnana. And that led me to reading much more Buddhist stuff and attending Krishnamurti's talks and Nisargadatta Maharaj and so on. And these are very important contributions to how one thinks today, Uday. Alay Vijnan, as I understand this, is a kind of ocean of consciousness. And where whatever you have noted consciously in subconscious, all that gets piled up without your knowing. And you have access to this. And it contributes to your thinking. Where do people say that things turn up genetically, but it's not correct. Not everything is genetically clicking with you. Maybe some scientists are saying 8-9% or very limited contribution to you, the way you perform, the way you act, the way you think in this world has to do with genetics. So you choose your own path. You're not a politician, for instance, like your father was, or you're not a physicist, as your father was. But you chose another line. Where does that come from? It's not necessarily, I mean, both of your parents were artistic in a way, like mine also. But then things happen. And that is what is being understood today as resonance to morphic fields, as quoting Rupert Sheldrake. So I find these things very close to one another, and that interests me.
I have a question that pertains to our relationship with the universe. I read a book called Home as a Reflection of the Self. I don't remember the author, but I find something very interesting, that the idea of a home is not just the building that you build, but it is that space. And of course, you and I both know that the space is the living part of the architecture. And from that perspective, is that space that brings meaning and creates a filter through which we can look inwards and outwards to creating that relationship between us and the universe. And so I think that's the relationship I do want to explore, and how it takes us to this idea that you've been talking about, the consciousness, relationships, and so on. But my question to you now is, now having established that, you talk about consciousness, you talk about spirituality, you have this curiosity. When I hear the narrative that's being dished out to people, which is also refers to spirituality, it refers to religion, it refers to our glorious ancient past and culture and traditions, how is that narrative different from the curiosity that you're pursuing, the path that you are pursuing? Then the reason I ask is because younger generation and many of the people in India today are buying into that without recognizing that that's not the only path. It's not their chosen path. It's a path that they're buying into. So how could they differentiate between your path and that path?
Yeah. You see, I think the way I have to give you a little background, which you all know, actually, as a designer, we were trained in the kind of exhausted modern tradition, Bauhaus, exhausted Bauhaus, I call it, because it was not true Bauhaus. And the way it came down, cascaded down to this country and elsewhere in the developing world was different. So it came down from people who worked with masters and things. But what actually happened there was people were trained to looking at architecture as a built form. That ultimately it's that you have to make. So the students would do exercises like this. They would start with a cube and puncture holes in it and things like. But that thing was very important as a cube. Now, over the years, working in rural India, tribal India, and in cities, in metropolises, and some work outside this country, I realize that it is to do with lots of processes. It is not necessarily to do with the built form. Built form is a result of it. But it is to do with a number of processes, which you become a catalyst and you become a participant in these processes. You become also an observer. This is a paradox because you are participating, but you are an observer in that process. And different people that want architecture for various purposes. Now one realizes that it is not just the build form. So I kept recently, in the last few years, I've been saying architecture is not visual, it is also visual, So it means quite a lot. Now you mentioned home. So home is, in Marathi, you would call Gavakade Challoy, I'm going home. A person who's come from a village working in place like Bombay, he says, I'm going home during the Ganesh festival or during the Diwalis. And what is that home? So this is not a home, but something else is a home. So it's a very strange thing. So you've got home, house, and hearth as the three kind of H's which are generally summing up the idea of home. But I have another something to add to that. And I said, we also come from someplace. So it ties very well with, somebody who's working in a city. For him or her, the home is the family house in a village, the farmland and so on. But at the same time, we also can say, being there, one again thinks like belonging to some other place. One is wondering where one comes from. And these are the riddles which have been explored for millions of years, maybe, theoretically, and in human existence, which is less than that probably. But you are exploring this, and this exploration is your process. So what happens? I go to a place in Bihar, in the rural Bihar. This is some of the earliest projects. And somebody asked me to do some tribal hostels. So you explore what is tribal coming from a city, what is their consciousness, what do they want, what are their aspirations, what is it that will make them feel homely and will have a sense of belonging. All these questions come up and you leave whatever you have learned and you discard the baggage. So I'm always having this person here. So, and he discards, he's free of the baggage. So you don't become an expert, but you actually somebody who says that I know does not know. And this is a very important issue. And this is something that Tagore has said, that is claim that I know something that can be sure that this guy doesn't know. So these are the issues that connect. There are different people. They talk different languages. They have different resources. They have different gods, if you like. They have different sense of participation. The neighbors contribute to making of a home. So you can see that it's an embodiment of the whole community, which is what we today in cities are deprived of. We just go and buy a thing like a commodity. It's like buying a bottle of shampoo. And this is what is happening, that you look at the brochure and you buy an apartment. But this is where I think people, I'm not romanticizing tribal and rural thing, but I'm pointing out to the issues which actually become very, very wholesome. Their life seems to be wholesome. They knew and respected the material that was found in the locality. They would use it judiciously, economically. They would use this with full understanding that it required maintenance, that it would require certain changes over 3 years, over 5 years, over 10 years, and who would carry out those changes. And then the houses had to be built like this. So all that, I think, is a process which you get when you want to design something, a house or anything. You're aware of this. They are all at the back of your mind, and they're gnawing, and they want to come out and express differently. They don't want to come out in the same spirit as they did in the past. So they're wanting to manifest, a new form, a new language. They will create a new language for that particular edifice. So this is what I think, something that matters to me a lot, actually. So you don't repeat your explorations. For us as artists, explorations will be science. And then that actually continues from many angles if you look at it. You see, I find that the build form and the space, that the space is continuous, space is omnipresent, space is everywhere, and build form is notional.
Mhm.
So, your backdrop is actually showing you that the columns and the elements and the pergola on the top, they're actually delineating the space. But if they're removed, the space is continuous. And if the build form can be suggestive as that, it can actually bring in its own expression the continuity, the omnipresent kind of spatial aspect, then I think one is pointing out not only to the build form, but something that is beyond it, something that runs through it, something that connects to another world. So, for instance, if you open a window, you connect yourself to a garden or a street or some vehicular busy street or some other buildings. And beyond that, there are other buildings. And beyond that, there is a garden. So all these different centers, as Christopher Alexander calls them centers. So there is an interconnection of these centers. They are overlapping. If they are overlapping with the full understanding of what is the surroundings and what are the immediate next surroundings and what are their holes, and there is nothing that is completely isolated from these. And that is where I think, if you like, spirituality comes into play. Like even in Christopher Alexander's work, he's calling luminosity of space, and it's not for no reason. It is exactly the same thing, that you look at the thing and you look at the build form, or that build form has consciousness, matter has consciousness, and then you don't deal with something that is dead matter, that this doesn't have life. Everything has life, and therefore your approach becomes very humble. You try and understand, and you try and connect. So this, we have lived somehow in a very, very fragmented world currently, especially post-industrial revolution. We have lived in a very sort of, there are many gains there, of course. There is no denial about that. But we have brought in for us, worshipping of machine has brought in for us a complete fragmentation. And the kind of connection that we are talking about, physical and metaphysical, phenomenal and nominal, these connections are, the words don't matter, they are actual real connections. And these can be explored if we are not worshipping any of the things. We are not worshipping machine, and today we are running after artificial intelligence. It's a similar kind of thing. So my concern has been accentuated now in the recent years with the involvement of personal involvement in Alexandrian way of thinking, also teaching and so on. One realizes that these centers are really active, throbbing centers, and these fields actually interconnect. And if we are aware of these, then something else happens.
Okay, that's great. So there's one word that I heard a lot as I was growing up in the midst of rational, secular, scientific thinking people. And that word in Marathi was called Buddhi Pramanyavad. I don't know what is the right word in English for that. Do you know?
I think you're talking about probably enlightenment. You're talking about the period after enlightenment with the Pramanyavad. But you see, Uday, I think, I was brought up in the same situation. I was brought up uh, in the home of my maternal grandfather,
Mhm.
whose father was a Prarthana Samajist. He was the first secretary of Prarthana Samaj. And so there were no gods, there were no images, there were no rituals, there were no I was completely cut off from these things. So naturally, what one was told and taught to respect was your intellect, buddhi, your convictions and rationality, as it was known then. But these are not fossilized definitions. You see, the buddhi is not something that is a particular piece of a block of wood or a stone. It's not rigid as that. It is changing, it is transforming. And with talking to you, talking to scientists, talking to artists, there are transformations happening. And so reason works in two ways. Reason works, I think, in finding how this cosmos works. So there is a reason. And where do we come from? There is another reason. So if you say that the first one is looking at how this cosmos works, science tells you equations, and from Newton to many other scientists until Einstein, Kepler, and many other scientists have told stories until quantum mechanics. So Newtonian theory has not remained as a fossilized belief that this is science. Science itself has changed. And here, on the other hand, where you find that philosophically, you're thinking of where you come from. What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of your work? What is the meaning of uh, belonging to this place and not belonging to this place? Science is not able to answer these questions. So there are two forms of reasons, and these two forms of reasons are not independent of each other. We have made them independent, but they are actually interconnected, which is why you have a dialogue between David Bohm and J. Krishnamurti, a physicist, a wonderful physicist talking to Krishnamurti. And things like that have been happening now. I think many physicists, biologists of some reputation, some really good work and research are involved in this, and they are talking about both of these to be combined. So there is a philosophy and there is a science, and both have to move to make sense. And how to make sense? When you think of building, then I must know, how to place stone above the stone, whether it will stand well or not. So I have to know that. There is the science of building things. And when it comes to that, there is no such thing, esoteric thing happening. But when I'm conceptualizing building, when I'm thinking beyond this reason, where metaphors come to your poetry and to painting and to all fine arts, they don't come from a particular realm of science. They come from elsewhere, many fields. So they come from experience, they come from non-experience, they come from what you have observed in the phenomenal world, what you have not observed, what you have observed in dreams. And then there are overlaps of these realities. So I think the reason that you mentioned is important. And I think these two facets of reason have to be understood by all of us.
So I want to share something. You talked about your moment of transformation in Maurankar Hall when you heard Krishnamurti. So I had a similar moment of epiphany, I would call it. So I was trained in the same Bauhaus tradition where building products is what I learned, right? And at best, it was more about functionality and a little bit about meaning, but still of the product. And then I went to graduate school. I studied psychology, anthropology, sociology, communications, and I became a researcher. I started going into people's homes, traveled around the world as a researcher, as an ethnographer. And the first thing that shocked me was that all the products that I had emulated from design magazines and presentations and conferences of designers, I didn't see them in people's homes. People's homes looked and felt different. There was chaos, there was mess, but there was meaning, there was comfort. And I started wondering, the home that I had learned to build, the Bauhaus, is so different from the home that makes it a home in people's lives around the world. I traveled to 50 countries, visited so many homes, and that made me question what I was trained to build. I also realized that, just as you, that designer is not the creator of design. Designer is only a participant in the process of design. I also realized that true design begins in social imagination. And now I would call it social consciousness. And it continues beyond what the designer builds because it evolves, just like you talked about the tribal engagement with the home. They have an idea of what maintenance means, what improvement means, what change means. So with this new knowledge of design, I began to get more interested in, rather than the form, the imagination and the zeitgeist that forms design in action beyond my own role as a creator of what I thought I was the creator of design. So that perspective, I kind of feel there are similarities between the way you are opening up to a new space of design and the way I'm seeing my own role in the new space of design. So now I'm going to come to a question. If we were to put our minds together and create a new school of design that takes a quantum leap from what Bauhaus believed design to be, and what this new consciousness helps us create a conscious school of design for the next generation, what would its attributes be? What would its principles be?
I think the most important thing is the uh, fluidity of intelligence that you have, you know, like a river.
Mhm.
It's a flow and it's a river, pravaha, if you call it. No? And very famously, people have said that you don't step into the same river twice because you have changed and the waters have changed. So nothing is the same, everything has changed. And so when we look at theory, when we look at manifestos of different schools of architecture or art or theories, we have to look at them not as the gospel truth. This is what I feel. They are very important. We have to read them and transcend them. We have to go beyond this. Any inquiry that uses that and wants to go beyond must be encouraged. Now, it cannot be a loose talk. It has to be, well, it must be based on experience, involvement, participation, and as science, reason, intuition, imagination, um, we cannot dispense with any of these four. This is what Mac Gilchrist has said. Ian Mac Gilchrist, and I completely agree with that. That you have four: science, reason, intuition, imagination, and they all are important. They're not. I mean, there could be finer differences between these, but they all contribute to making. And so we don't have to look at it as a finite form of any kind. And you rightly mentioned that having designed these houses, and once I went to a place in New Jersey, I was staying with a friend. And she said, there is some very funny building that has happened here. And, but nobody looks at this. I said, I want to see that funny building. And sure enough, it was designed by a very well-known star architect, but anyway, whoever. So I wanted to see this. What has happened is the precious things that we have at home, like there are belongings, you maybe you like your grandfather's clock or your mother's certain, work of art, and you are attached to that. There is this feeling that actually brings you together. And if we don't work on the feeling and we are working on this edifice which has lack of feeling, then there is a problem. There is an enormous problem. And so, even if you make a small thing yourself as a father to your very small daughter, you must have made something, a drawing that you made, or a crafted object that you made yourself. That is very precious for her, and she would, remember this forever, that this is given to me by my father. And, and it is not some object which is coming from the Bauhaus or X discipline. There may be rules and regulations which you have learned to decode various aspects of making, but you also discard them, or you go beyond them. Not discard, you graft something on them and you build something else. So imagination is that you mentioned. I think the imagination goes beyond reason, because reason has certain limitations. Like we said, there are two ways of looking at this. One is thinking about where you come in from, where you came in from, and where you belong, why do you love somebody, etc. Are not completely defined. There are no punch cards for all this. So I think the feeling is something, unless it is brought back into design, and that feeling is not to be understood as your personal hang-up as a designer, but a feeling that you discover in your encounter with, your clients, your the city or the nature or other sentient beings that you are working for. You may be working for animals, you may be working for trees, you may be working for, there's some very, very wonderful things that are happening. And I don't know whether you've heard of this Maruti Chitampalli, a writer in Marathi who was a forest officer, and he narrated a very touching story. He tells you that if you went to a forest, the trees look at you as a stranger. Trees don't know who you are, where you come in from, what your intentions are, and they take time to adjust to your presence. And once you are there and the trees understand you, you are one amongst them. And there is nothing that is held back. And this is an eye-opener, really. And what we talk about interconnectivity is not about just human beings, but it is nature talks to you, nature tells you many things, and it signals in the change of seasons, it signals on about calamities happening. So I think, this is what matters to a designer when you look at this. And the build form is a kind of expression that comes after this. So Nisargadatta Maharaj, Indian philosophy has said, there is avyakta, there is vyakti, and there is vyakta. Avyakta is always avyakta. It is unexpressed, unmanifest, and unmanifest will remain unmanifest. Because, what we were told to call abstract, and now I'm challenging that, because abstraction I call as a process and not as an ultimate goal. And as architects, as designers, we were told that, are you an abstractionist? Are you a painter who does abstract paintings? And then that means your path and your canvas and everything is kind of already charted out. Everyone knows what you're going to do. And exploration becomes limited. I'm not saying it is ended, but it is limited. Now, therefore, what happens is the formless, which is what we thrive to sort of catch. It's a kind of a ghost, a spirit, which you try to catch in the design. That's a wonderful process. That is endless. And that keeps us going in life. We don't know what's happening around the corner. So I think that is something that needs to be remembered when you mention this common man's house and the objects thereof and their responses to that. And today, we make a huge mistake when we call, but they have aspirations. These aspirations are your aspirations as somebody who's sitting in a metropolis. You think that they are different than you and they have these aspirations. They require some funny stuff like, the glass boxes that you want to live in. They also want to live in. What's wrong with them? And this is, I think, an argument which takes us to a kind of wrong direction, if I may say so.
So another thought that comes to me is you just give that amazing story about the trees talking to me. So every object in the universe talks to us, has its own place and energy and way of interacting with us, whether we consider it animate or inanimate. In the same way, I'm sure the architecture that you have built has evolved beyond your intentions and your imagination. Have you ever gone back to something you built 20, 30 years ago and seen it evolved and
Yes.
living with people in ways that you never imagined?
Well, I haven't had any opportunity to go back and live there, but I've had an opportunity, not 20 years. Well, you could say, because some buildings in Pune, for instance, were built exactly 20 years ago, like the Ramakrishna Mandir that was designed exactly 25 years ago, 23 years ago. So I do have the opportunity to go there and see. But this is a kind of a gift where the participants, you and the builder meaning the one who are making. I'm not talking about the builder as the developer, but the builder who builds and the mason who makes, the carpenter who really works and gives their soul to the whole work. Now, if they are together, they are not just bound by a written contract, then things happen differently. This is what my personal experience is. That there is transparency, there is participation, there is transparency about the cost, about the changeability, about the transformations that happen to design, the mutations that take place in the ideas. You discover new things, you exchange. And if that happens, I think architecture lives. But if that does not happen, then architecture or the built form has a limited life. Limited, narrow, and in many ways it can remain an object of awe. It can remain an object of awe, a kind of very sublime form which you are afraid of, which you are looked down upon by the staff, but which is not necessarily something that you want to belong to.
I get it. So in the same spirit, my question is, now everybody's talking about AI, artificial intelligence. Considering it as its own entity with its own energy and its own way of interacting with humanity, what is your position on it? Is it something to be feared? Is it something because it's a part of our environment which has emerged for a reason? How do we accommodate it? Do we resist it? How do we live with it?
Uday, some scientists have called it artificial stupidity.
Mm-hmm.
Some have also called it artificial information, not intelligence. And this is something that can be, for instance, if you are an expert, experienced cardiologist, or let's say a cancer surgeon, then what makes you an expert? Because you have performed thousands of surgeries. So you got the backing of empirical, information, empirical knowledge. And when you come to artificial intelligence, what is happening? You are feeding to that machine your 1,000 experiences, and your colleagues who have other 100 or 500 experiences. All these experiences are fed into that machine. And that machine, therefore, is supposed to be more intelligent than you are all put together. And this is the paradox, because it doesn't happen like this. You are the one who have fed that information there. It works on certain energy. When the energy stops, that machine, collapses. It doesn't work. So the point to understand here is that it has a limited meaning. It has a meaning to perform certain things which you, for instance, there is a calamity, there is an earthquake, there is some flood happening, and you want to take action very quickly, and the human action may take time, and lots of lives have to be saved, in which case that thing will work very well. But if it is worked with that experience, there is something that goes above this, which is human experience. The human experience is not those 1,000 and 500 and 200 put together, but it always has the chance of going beyond. And that beyondness is not fed into that machine in the same way as it is coming from us because of certain things. So I think we have to look at this for certain information, certain help that it can give to major issues in cities and maybe life also. However, you can't be worshipping. We will make the same mistake. If you remember the Charlie Chaplin's film, The Modern Times, you find that the machine actually has become such a big, powerful thing, or the Frankenstein, which actually becomes a monster, and it can take over completely. So I feel that I saw some examples. For instance, I think it was in South Korea. I read about it, that there is a building which takes all calls. That your car is approaching the building, and the building and the gate and the lift recognize that you are arriving. The elevator knows that you have come, and everything is open. And then you go, your way. And in the process, what has happened is you have become completely alien, actually. Your potential to interact with me, your friends, your family, with the nature that you're sitting in, all this has become kind of an artificial world, if you like, because you are disconnected from this. And what is it that it is helping to perform? It is facilitating certain functions, utilitarian functions, and it is also facilitating luxury. It is also happening, because only a bunch of people, 5%, 2% of this world population can afford this intelligence. And when I look at my country, I said, who will afford this? And for what? They know immediately what is to be done. If the house is collapsing, the water is coming down, they know what to do. They don't require to start a machine to tell them what to do, but they know what to do. So I think this is a very important differentiation between what we imagine it to be. I think we don't have to look at it as something that is yet another God, because there is this paradox, Uday. There is the paradox of, there is two extremes. The religious extreme takes you to a place, and the political extreme, I won't tell you which one, I don't have to. Both meet at the same time. They both meet. It's a full circle. They both are fundamentalists. They both have the same energy. So, they are disconnected from the whole. They are disconnected from the whole. And this is something that can never be forgotten.
So what I hear from you is that there's no need to fear AI. It is utilitarian but limited in application to the society. And a lot of us, there are two kinds of fears expressed with it. One is that it would be misused by people with bad intentions. And number two is that it might become sentient. Do you believe AI can become sentient, or human capacities are much larger than a machine's capacity to be sentient?
There's no say, because what do you mean by sentient? Making AI sentient? What do you mean? You make the AI as God, because you don't know what the God is, and you've not fed in enough of experience of spirituality into this. So it is not as sentient as human being. I think the human being are probably more sentient, have a better opportunity, better chance of going beyond rather than this. And the AI, yes, certainly can be misused. Certainly can be misused. Like the machine was misused. Oppenheimer used, he made atom bomb, to sort of destroy. And when Einstein realized that this is not the way to follow science, he parted company immediately. So I think the most important here, learning, is becoming aware of your immediate action. Should I do this? Should I not do this? There is no this kind of dilemma. But I'm not doing this, or I'm already active. Perception is actually action. So if I'm active in this, then I'm observant in Krishnamurtian terms. The observer and observed are the same. And in that sense, you are not divorced from it. But if you say that the machine, the artificial intelligence is becoming more intelligent, it can certainly be. We have a number of examples today. In today's society, I don't have to name this at the moment, but we do realize that how people can be 1940, what is that? Orwell's book.
Yeah.
So 1942, was it? So
1984.
1984.
Yeah.
So
1984. So I have just to build up on that, and I think I'll start narrowing down our conversation. So through all this, I am becoming more and more drawn to our consciousness. And my question to you is there a difference between what we considered imagination and now what we see as consciousness? Is there a difference between imagination and consciousness?
I believe so, because what comes first is the consciousness, really. You become conscious of the world. When you're born, you become conscious. You become conscious of yourself and the other. It's not imagined thing. And imagination is coming from a number of things that your faculties allow you to read reality. Reality as seen in the physical world, reality in the dream world, reality, whatever. But that is real. And then if you are into that, that creates a kind of waves of imagination. They are extremely important. That's extremely important because it is coming from what you've experienced in this world, or the world that you have imagined, the world you have dreamt of. And but consciousness is much more fundamental. Consciousness is present everywhere. Everything starts from consciousness. Everything starts from consciousness. That it is because you are conscious that you can do certain things, you know. And there is a story in the Upanishad which I keep telling many times. The story is of two birds sitting on the same branch. And one bird is eating the fruit and the other does not, but looks on. Now there is this kind of observer within the observer, and which has no truck with your ego, which has no truck with you. It has no connection with the form. It is completely formless. It is nirguna nirakara, as it is explained. It has no quality. It has no form. It has no color, but it is there. And for no reason, now and then, it seems to assume form for a particular thing, but it does not lose its presence. It remains. Now, that's something that is the seat of consciousness, really. आपल्याकडे, what we say is जाणीव आणि नेणीव. And there is a little difference. Zaaniv is much more conscious of the phenomenal world. Neniv is, which is not of the ego. So these two aspects, I think one has imagination definitely has a seat in experience of many kinds of experiences. Maybe physical, maybe sexual, maybe visual, maybe non-visual, maybe utilitarian, maybe scientific research, maybe talking to a community and things like that. So from there, the imagination starts. How it will flower, how it will demand a process is a miracle.
Wonderful. So I have one final question for you. I have to respect your time constraints. My purpose in creating this dialogue, and I'm going to talk to several people, is that I want to provoke the next generation, young generation, in thinking for themselves, creating their own journey. And I want them to have a moment of epiphany that you had sitting in Maulankar auditorium, of having a fresh perspective on life and not just take what's given to them. What would be your parting? You're a teacher. You interact with the world. You have so much wisdom. What would you say to this younger generation as a message?
Well, I'm nobody to really give a message, I don't take that position. But my thing, what I keep telling myself is, do I observe? Do I actually witness? Am I aware of the evolving nature of universe? Am I aware? Because every small action, has ripples everywhere. You may think that this is a very small thing. Now there is if I may, I'll tell you that small story of Carlos Castaneda. You may have read him, and he goes to research with an Indian in the forest, and he wants to learn about medicine, traditional medicine, and he doesn't learn. And he at the camp at night in some location. I'll be very brief. And the preacher, the person there, is a sorcerer. He tells him, "Look, you can cut these bushes, and we'll cook our meal." So he starts cutting 3-4 of them. He said, "Don't cut 3-4. We don't need it. We need only one." He said, "But how does it happen? It is plenty." He said, "Everything is watching you. Every plant, everything, the universe is watching you." And so if that is the kind of responsibility and awareness, if we are aware of this evolving universe and its action, I think the ego becomes probably smaller, and the work starts representing many more things. It has much better. I think it is something that people would like to visit. It carries that element that we talked about. That element of spirituality, if you like, the looking beyond. That building is there, but there is something beyond it that it tells you. It draws you back, not because of the building alone. Building is there, it's beautiful, but it is telling you a story which is beyond its scope. And that is what brings you back, you know. So
Right.
I think this is something to be discovered by all of you, all of
Excellent.
us.
I do have one
Teachers.
more question.
Yes.
Your Nana and my Nana were friends. Our families were friends, our community. If looking back, if today you had to be grateful or express your thanks to them for something, what would you thank them for?
Well, I thank everything, everything. I thank my father to and mother, who brought me in contact with people like your father, like N.G. Gore, S.M. Joshi, Bhausaheb Ranade, all those friends. I don't have to name them, their family names. And, I mean, one was picking up such enormous stuff from them about tradition also, about working together, about, maintaining things yourself and learning about Gandhi. I think Gandhi is irreplaceable. I do feel this. Here he was a man who understood what is meant by, we use this term, I said to you maybe some time back, that we use as architects and urban planners and designers, we say urban fabric. Gandhi really knew the fabric that is khadi, which is what I'm wearing today, khadi, and that connects the whole consciousness of this country. It doesn't have to be belonging to a particular religion, caste, creed, psychology, political system. Everyone, understood the meaning of this. Everyone understood how it connected, and they are actually brought together. You know, you don't require a slogan. You just bring them together in this act. That making, thinking they are not divorceable. They are together, and this is the fabric. So I think this is what I owe them a lot. And your father was one of the last ones to visit my father. Yeah. And by that time my father had lost his memory almost, and he had gone out for a walk up the hills with his nurse, and he came back, and your father was already here, and he said, don't tell him that I'm here, let me see whether he knows me. My father entered, and I said, Nana, do you know who has come? So he looked inside. He said, Madhu. And your father had tears. Something one doesn't forget.
How beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Narendra.
Oh, thanks. I don't know whether we covered something, but
Well, this is an ongoing dialogue. I really hope that these dialogues, when they're put out on the internet, the younger generation would have some more things to think about and to create
yeah,
their own path into the future.
sure. I think together you're building a very good body. You've got fantastic intentions. You started with technology, and this progress and building and growth, and to that I respect all that, but I do feel that the progress and growth is really within. There is no difference between within and without, really. And but you have to be aware of both. If you leave one of the two, you had it. And
Absolutely.
this is what I told my engineer friends, that why is it that you as engineers and we as architects have gone away from each other? Because this is where we build flyovers and funny junctions and systems which are technologically marvelous, but they've actually ruined history, actually ruined ecology. They're not bothered about pedestrians. Why? And why can't we come to? If we don't come together, we will lose. Some the paradise was given to us. It's right here. We are not looking at it as, we are looking at some strange paradise which is promised by somebody. This was the paradise.